Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.
Photography can be very, very captivating. It can capture those still shots and freeze those moments in time that can be indelible. And I work with a form of therapy which is EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is a memory-based therapy for trauma. And it actually uses a system and a model where we access traumatic memories in those frozen moments that have been left unprocessed and raw in the memory. So for me, there's of course that aspect to it. And I think photography is, it captures those moments that you want to relive in your life. I've been to some amazing places and I so much want to savor those moments. And with time, either the memory gets even more enlivened and deeply entrenched and embedded. And photography is something that's I think it's just a wonderful gift and innovation.
Podcasting remotely can be a real pain. It's quite challenging, but it doesn't have to be. Zencastr has this all-in-one web-based platform and makes the process really quick and easy. That's the way it should be, right? Just focus on the podcast. So let's talk about the quality and the challenge of recording online. So Zencastr gives crystal clear sound and really nice HD video. I know I don't use it, but it's there. Now, that's not even to mention how easy it is to use. Like even for my guests that aren't even that tech savvy. There's nothing to download. They just click on the link and start recording. Zencastr is all about making your podcasting experience easy, and everything from local recording to automatic post-production in the tool. You don't have to leave your browser to get the episode done. Maybe you want to make podcasts as well. I mean, I think it's a great idea personally. Obviously, I'm running one. I think you should make one too. It's easy. Just do it. I actually use Zencastr. If it sounds great, that's because the platform works. And if it sounds like crap, that's because I've done something wrong. But Zencastr really does give me amazing quality from my guests. If you go to zencastr.com/pricing, blah, 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 and enter this promo code, look, it's already long and confusing, and I'll just make it easier by putting the link and the promo code in the episode description. If you do that, you get 30% off your first 3 months. So that's actually pretty sweet. So look in the description for the link and the promo code, and then you get 30% off to start doing your own podcast. Do it. Go for it. Zencastr. I have so many things. I want to jump in. I'm just so happy. Okay. So, Nivedita, how did I say your last name? Nivedita? Or is that the bad way of saying your first name?
There's no such bad.
Okay. How would your mommy say your name?
My mommy. So she would say Nivedita.
Nivedita.
It's a Vedic name.
Right, Nivedita. Okay. Yeah. And your surname?
Ramanujam.
Ramanujam.
You heard of the famous mathematician Ramanujam?
I think we dated for a little while, but not really. No, I don't think so. No. Okay.
You should look him up, and his history is amazing.
Okay, well, I'm sure. So what does your first name mean? Does it mean anything? Or?
Yeah, Nivedita means an offering of love.
Okay.
So at the altar, typically when you go to a temple, at least in India, you would always offer some leaves and flowers, just as a token of reverence. Mm-hmm. And so Nivedyam is an offering of love.
Okay.
That's what it means.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you for letting me into your home. Okay, so this is what the world is amazing. The world is amazing. Okay, so the podcast, I go with the flow of my thinking, go with the flow of what interests me, and then I reach out to people. I don't even remember how I found your name, but you explaining EMDR therapy, you will be the third person on the podcast, as it happens, who uses EMDR. And
really?
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
So you mean you've had other therapists who've used it, or you're talking about other individuals?
Other therapists who used it. So one, Monica Borschel, is Oh, so you know Monica? Okay.
It's a small world.
Ah.
Hong Kong, isn't it?
Oh, right,
Yeah.
exactly. Right.
Right.
But now she's in California.
Right, she's moved.
And then another one who just wrote a book called EMDR and Sexual Health, or Sexual Therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically a clinician's guide for using EMDR for treating sexual growth, sexual development, all that stuff. So maybe that's how so I didn't realize you lived in Saikong. I live in Saikong. So it's like, hi neighbor.
Hello neighbor. Yes, and
So
you finally
good.
meet, right?
So good. Really great. And so now thank you for welcoming you to your home. The goodies are over here. I'll put the goodies over here because we're not going to use this table.
Well, please do it for you.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. What's great about the podcast is my energy is extremely all over the place, but luckily you nod very, very nicely. What the conversation is framed around what you want to talk about. So it's all comfortable. It's all who you are. It's all, yes. So I don't look at the photos until I meet either online or face to face.
Okay.
And I'm deliberately ignoring what's on the laptop because I want to look at it and just respond right away.
Okay. All right.
So shall we go into your first photo?
Absolutely. So the first photo is not that one. I put it in order.
Okay. So let
if you
me
could just switch.
Let me.
So this is the first one.
Okay. Can I move this monitor a little bit?
Just a bit. Yeah.
Okay. The first image is your logo.
Yes.
I have to describe it for the listener.
Okay.
Okay, so it says Inner Compass, Zen of Mind, Body, Wellness. And the logo itself it looks like, for example, like a brushed circle with these upward sort of brush strokes at the cardinal points, so north, south, east, and west. Within the sort of circle is what looks like it could be a lotus flower. And there's in shades of brown. So the whole color palette here is all, the text is in black, but the logo itself has browns and tan. So within the main, let's say the stamen of the flower is a person, like a figure, not so much it looks quite feminine with the arms kind of held above. And above that are three ellipses of decreasing size, kind of rising up. And how old is this logo?
So this logo is about 5 years old, 5 to 6 years old.
Okay. And Inner Compass. Take it away.
Okay. Well, I want to tell you a little bit more. So you see the circle, which is the infinity, the circle, which is the yin and the yang. Then you see that he's holding up the hands up and looks like a flame.
Yes.
Right? And then you have these Zen pebbles. Right? So, and then you have the lotus.
Yeah.
So, what comes out of the lotus, the murky ponds, is a beautiful, beautiful lotus.
Yep.
Right? So that depicts very much how our lives are, isn't it? Through struggles where we reach higher and we surface from so many difficulties, and overcoming those difficulties is why I thought this was a beautiful logo, and I went in for it.
So how was it? What was the history of this particular graphic, and what is Inner Compass?
Okay, so Inner Compass Psychotherapy. I provide, and my team provide a psychological therapy for PTSD, for trauma, for OCD, for grief, loss, anxiety, depression, and chronic illnesses.
Oh, wow.
And we offer both Western and Eastern evidence-based psychological therapies, and to offer a more holistic, scientific, as well as the spiritual management of emotional difficulties.
Okay.
Not religious, but spiritual, and I'll come to that shortly. So there are many levels and layers of inputs, ranging from evidence-based psychological therapy such as EMDR, CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, psychodynamics, which looks at the realm of the conscious and unconscious material, transaction analysis, and then, of course, the Eastern psychological therapies rooted in mindfulness, meditation, breath work through pranayama.
Right.
And we also have a certified therapist who's trained in trauma-sensitive yoga therapy.
Okay.
And a nutritional coach.
Right. I find it, okay, I fancy myself the mayor of Saikong, figuring that I know everybody in Saikong. I don't think I've met you before. I don't think I've seen you before. How does it happen? Like, how can you live here and me not even know? It's amazing.
Well, that's a very...
Sorry, I can be loud sometimes.
No, that's absolutely on point, because I think I've spent most of my time in therapy room, working with my clients and my patients. And I'm also in the process of doing the last leg of my doctorate.
Oh, okay.
And that's a 5-year journey.
Ah, yes.
And I paint a lot.
Okay.
And in my free time, I go hiking, I paint. Yes, I need to go out there and meet people.
Yeah.
But I think the last 5 years has been dedicated to a lot of inner growth work, as well as, the doctorate.
Okay, so you have a title for your doctorate?
For the
thesis, or for basically the final work?
I'm actually choosing between two.
Okay.
So
I'm not going to put you on the spot to tell, but okay, so what is the, let's talk shop. Like what university are you working through?
So it's California Southern University.
Okay.
And it's long distance, it's online.
Yep.
And
how it's been for all the universities the past 2 years, right? Realistically.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what is the section of the library or the specialization?
Trauma as well.
Trauma? Okay.
Yes. So I'm possibly looking at maternal separation anxiety during the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
And the other thing that actually also intrigues me and interested me a lot is the issue with the pets, the culling of the hamsters and its impact on pet parents. Right. So between the two, I'm kind of debating, depending on how much information I get. And as I do the survey, depending on how much information I'm able to gather, and then I will decide then which one I'm going for.
Wow.
Yes.
I didn't know. I didn't realize. This is great. Okay, so in terms of the practice, the clinic, that work, is it linked to? Is it like? How long has this been going? How old is this practice, and have you been with it?
Okay, I've been in clinical practice for 22 years.
Wow.
And I specialized in trauma in the last, I would say, 12 years.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, so big picture.
Okay.
So I don't know if you were born in Hong Kong or how long your family has been connected to Hong Kong.
So I was raised in Hong Kong.
Okay.
And I did my school and my high school here. And then I moved to Singapore and India. And after 2 decades, I returned back to Hong Kong. So I came back in 2016. So I've been practicing both in Singapore and India.
As a
psychotherapist?
No, okay, but as a practicing psychotherapist. India, Singapore, Hong Kong. These are 3, let's call them populations that are quite different. What is the common thread? Is there a common thread?
Regardless of where we are geographically, yes, pain is a common thread. The human condition is universal. The human experience and the human aspirations, they come in different manifestations, but underlying all of it, we all want the same thing, which is love and acceptance and fulfillment.
So going back to the image, just to pull it back to the logo, which is how you wanted to start. Would you like to say something else before we go on to the next image, or do you feel that was a good enough introduction to who you are? Oh,
okay. Well, since it was about who I am is basically my passion, which is my work, which is helping people who are, especially those who have been traumatized by, it could be grief, loss of a child, it could be a very tragic experience they underwent, could be an accident, memories etched in your childhood, or even currently in relationships.
Yeah.
Not many people specialize in trauma.
Right.
But that's where I wanted to go, because I myself underwent a fair bit of trauma when my daughter had a brain tumor.
Oh, wow.
And that was my journey, beginning of my journey into looking at, what really does help, what makes that difference.
Sure.
So yes, that's basically what I do.
Okay. Shall we move on to the next image?
One.
So this is a photograph.
Yes.
And the main 2/3 of the image is of a kitchen table. Very colorful. Nice, beautiful food. It almost looks like I love food. So in one of them, it almost looks like cabbage wraps. So like purple and green cabbage with a nice kind of chutney of some sort. Then there's another small bowl with very green, bright green chutney or some kind of dip. Next to that are these like dry baked, looks like kofta, but it doesn't look like meat. So it's probably some kind of vegetarian grilled thing.
Those are tempehs.
Tempeh, nice. And then there's this very handsome man with a nice goatee and a beautiful purple shirt, which visually so I know you're a painter, so that influences how you see the world. So you understand color theory and all that stuff. So you sent me this image. So there's the balance of his very nice, shall we call it, aubergine shirt, which echoes and reinforces the red cabbage leaves. And he's just starting, because his plate is relatively clean. And he's eating one of the grilled tempeh sticks.
Right. So that's tempeh, and the other one is actually peas kebab.
Ah, okay. Peas kebab, right.
Peas and lots of other green veggies,
Nice.
Kebab, right.
Do you cook?
I do.
Now you must.
I do. I love cooking. I think it's a way of really sharing. Food for me is a very spiritual experience.
Sure.
I feel that food is a way to reconnect with Earth spiritually.
Okay.
So I was born a vegetarian, raised a vegetarian rather.
Sure.
And then some 10 years ago, I decided to become a vegan, but mostly plant-based, whole plant-based vegan, which is not the same thing as just being a vegan. There's a difference.
Okay.
So in whole plant-based food, you don't really cook with oils, right? And you might think that food is pretty, how would it be tasty?
Sure.
But yeah, well, I think when people put food into their bodies, we need to engage with it on so many levels. Your body is your subconscious mind.
Okay.
And what you put into it affects your mind and your body.
Absolutely.
Right?
I agree with you. Yeah.
And there are so many things to consider which I didn't think about till I went on this journey.
Okay.
For example, is your food wholesome? The concept in Buddhist psychology about wholesomeness is it not just good for me, only for me, but is it good for the earth when I partake of it? And we don't think of that when we consume things, whether it's food, material things, objects, right? Is it ethically sourced? Is it organic? Has it been treated well? Has it been treated kindly? What is its journey to us? Right. Something also I wouldn't have thought about.
Right.
You're raised to eat and you really don't put that kind of thought into it. Also, is it purposeful? Am I wasting? Am I eating too much? Am I addicted to it? What's my relationship with it? Right. Then also mindful consumption. Do I need to go for a buffet? Do I need 2 grains? Exactly.
Go straight to the buffet. About as decadent or yeah. Okay,
Exactly.
got it.
So when you talk about mindful consumption, it's about, for example, when I have a meal now, I don't want to have 2 grains in it, 2 types of grains.
Okay.
So if I decide that I'm going to have quinoa,
Yeah.
I'm not going to have then something wheat or with bread with it. To keep it simple, I wouldn't say minimal at all, but enough that you take from this earth what you need without exploiting it, and you benefit from it for the fullest. So this is one aspect of consumption. So, people often ask, don't you kill plants? Right?
Right.
The argument, like.
Sure.
And this is something I really like to delve into and explain because I studied it. The difference is that plants don't have an advanced neural system. So the lower down the chain, the food chain, the lower the level of neural complexity and therefore the lower the level of harm and injury and pain. Yeah. Right?
Or so the idea goes, right? Like you think a crab is not going to feel pain.
Right. But the thing is, take a branch and cut it. What happens? It regrows.
And sometimes it bleeds in the sense of the sap oozes and
If you call that, all right, you see something oozing, but it regrows.
Right.
Or you take a stem and you put it with a flower, a bud.
Right.
You put it in a vase. What happens? It blooms.
Sure.
You cut an animal's leg, what happens? Pain and death, right?
Right.
So the concept of ahimsa
Yeah.
in Buddhist teachings or in Vedic teachings is
Mhm.
the concept of least injury.
Right.
Now, so if you decide that you do want to take meat, then perhaps to go for something that's grass-fed so that it's seen some freedom, it's lived a life.
Sure.
So the concept is to eat and partake in a conscious manner.
Yeah, mindfulness for sure.
Mindfulness.
Yeah.
So I really like this concept of, sort of turning plant-based, because for me it was then having embarked on mindfulness and studying it in Connecticut, going for, mindfulness and meditation.
You just said
retreats.
in Connecticut?
Yes.
That is a bit of cognitive. That took a hard right. And Connecticut. Okay, we're now out in Connecticut. No, it's great. It's great. I wasn't expecting that word to come out your mouth.
So I went for a retreat,
Yeah.
which is about noble silence and doing everything, whether you're eating or meditating. It's all about doing it with a high level of consciousness and awareness.
Right.
It really resonated with me.
Sure.
And after that, when I decided to become a vegan, then I decided to go on a culinary kind of a adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And I started cooking some amazing stuff. And I felt that, the food that I eat today is far more delicious than the food I
Right.
used to eat as a vegetarian. Because I started innovating. And I started cooking with a dehydrator. I started having kefirs. I started having fermented lentils and
Right.
savories. And I don't consume sugar, so I use plant-based kind of, it could be raisins made with dates.
Right.
But overall, there's a strong connection with food in the sense that I feel it connects me back to earth, being grateful and being mindful of the resources that we either exploit or that we use to the benefit of the earth.
Okay, so one little question. I mean, you've already addressed how your connection to eating and then your connection to mindfulness and your development as a professional, as somebody who gives to the people around you. So how do you connect? So when you look at trauma, how do you connect trauma and eating? Which, if you're eating meat, is a violent. I mean, if you're disconnected from the meat that you eat, you're just like, oh, it's just meat, and you don't understand the animal. But if you know the animal and you know that, I mean, the violence that comes onto the trauma that comes onto them. So how do you connect trauma to your growth and your understanding of this very specialized way of eating?
Both have one common element, and this is the bringing the element of compassion. So whether it's food that you connect with, once you bring the element of compassion, you go beyond just what benefits you and the taste. Similarly in trauma, from my perspective, at least as a therapist, when you suspend judgment and you bring in the element of compassion and help the person who has gone through trauma, and there's a lot of shame and guilt involved in their experiences more often than not, right?
Yeah.
The first thing is to teach them to suspend judgment and to bring this self-compassion, and hard enough as it may be, even compassion for the perpetrators. But that we don't go there always, depending on whether the patient or the client is ready.
Sure.
But the common thread is always compassion in what we do and how we approach issues in our lives and what we partake of in life.
Fascinating. The connection I'm making is when I think her name is Karina Calver. Her thing was, from the Western perspective, like in terms of counseling and helping others, it goes to acceptance and reaches acceptance. But from the Western, Eastern side, and for her, Buddhism was very important for her own dealing with trauma. For her, the higher level, you use the word compassion in her vocabulary. She would say forgiveness. So how does forgiveness fit into or does it fit? I'm just kind of connecting the dots. So how would you connect that?
Forgiveness is never about the forgiven, it's about the forgiver. So from that perspective, forgiveness doesn't mean you condone what's been done to you. Forgiveness in this sense is about you moving from your past to a place of inner peace. And that inner peace has got nothing to do with the other person. It's got to do with the decision that you make, that you want to let go of the anger or the bitterness, or move away from the past to reduce the, I would say, emotional charge connected with that experience.
Yeah.
So this is about my trip to Canada.
Okay.
Telling you about.
Fantastic. Okay, so let me describe. Okay, so in the photo, were you the photographer?
Yes.
Okay, so it's basically shot head on into this old, slightly weathered fence post that's shoulder level. The shoulder that we're talking about is of this beautiful brown, it's such a like rich tones of brown of a horse. Probably about, let's say, I'm not good with hands, but let's say about 1.5 meters to its back, and then beautiful head with this lovely, normally I don't like bangs on humans, but this horse has beautiful bangs, very nice coif. The background, since you said, or there's been words of Canada, is this nice green and this nice grasses. There seems to be some kind of pond or a lake behind with a gravel road, and there's the coniferous forest of green. The time of year is hard to know. If it's definitely not winter, but it's probably spring or fall.
Fall. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, and you, what was the name of the horse?
So the horse was named Mary. Her
Mary.
name is Mary.
Okay, so why are we looking at Mary?
Well, we're looking at Mary because she taught me some very profound things. I love traveling, I think, as most people do. But when I travel, I really want to understand connections, the origins of things, culture, how things are interlaced. And so I stayed at this amazing place. It was actually a ranch. And she was the lone horse there.
What? It was a ranch with one horse?
With one horse.
Hell of a ranch.
Exactly. Now, what happened is that the owner had agreed to kind of keep her basically until her current owner reclaimed her. So he wasn't really able to provide her. And she had just been separated from her foal. And they're a herd animal, right? So they like to be in groups.
Yeah.
And she'd just been separated from her foal, and I could just sense her loneliness and her grief. And I would go up there every morning, and I would have some apples chopped, and I'd feed her. And I wanted to know the background to her life. And that's the first time that I came in touch or was enlightened about what happens in the so-called horse world. And it just made me realize how little we know about, at least about the horse world.
Or other animal worlds.
Or other animal worlds,
yeah.
Exactly. Unless you're in nature and connected.
3 dogs.
I have 3 dogs,
okay.
exactly.
Keep going.
So she had been separated from her foal. And her pain and sadness was so palpable. You would see her in the distance looking away and actually looking for a foal. So I asked the lady who had hosted us, where we stayed at the Airbnb at the ranch. And she told me that basically that's the horse world. They get impregnated. They're made impregnated. As soon as they have their foal, they're taken away, if it's a male, to be sold for horse racing. And they'll keep doing that to her until she's of no more use.
Yeah.
And that would be the end of her. Right? And so that got me thinking, there we go again, It seems like our addictions or our entertainment or our joy in this world is based on so much of cruelty. Because, we turn up in fineries to go to these horse betting events.
Right.
There's a jockey club. I don't want to give names, but,
yeah.
the world over.
Sure.
And it's a sport. We just don't understand, or we maybe just turn a blind eye to what we do to them. And it just so happened that every day when I would just set off to do my sightseeing, she would be the first and the last thing. And strangely, even at night when I would go to bed, she would be in my mind. I could just tell that she'd be roaming restlessly outside in the ranch by herself.
So you're doing these studies. You've done this work. You sit face to face with people. You're trained your whole evolution, your whole life. So you have your own trauma that you work through in order to kind of make sense of your own experience. And then you happen to be on this Airbnb and your mind has evolved into this state that you're able to read, empathize, connect with this horse, where there's this one lone horse who you connect with on a really emotional level. Despite what your conscious thoughts may be, you go sightsee, you come back, and there she is, you go lie in bed, and you're internalizing, processing, and how do you understand why you were so ready to empathize with Mary in such a deep way for her to actually change how you think?
Okay, so on several levels. First, that I'm a mother, right? And whether you're a dog mom, whether you're a human mom, I would think that those emotions of love and protection for your offspring would be universal, right? So on that level, that was the first level of connection.
Sure.
Right? The second level of connection would be, of course, the fact that I'm a trauma specialist. And very quickly, I would be able to zoom in on what's going on here. She's by herself. She's helpless.
Exactly.
She's helpless. And she's grieving. And I work with grief. And the third level, which is the understanding that this is a lesson for me to further educate myself. I've gone from being vegetarian to being vegan, then not possessing goods made of leather. It's just about, what do I really need?
Right.
What can I give to this planet? What do I need from this earth? What I don't need. Your happiness doesn't come in the form of luxuries and material things. Your happiness comes in being in harmony with the earth and nature. And nature can be very cruel. And just because nature is cruel, does it mean that then I justify partaking from nature because nature means the stronger eat the weaker?
Right.
It doesn't resonate with me, because then that would mean that a person who has been subject to violent trauma, because it's so-called viewed as a weaker person by the perpetrator, it's justified.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't make sense.
Exactly. Well,
right?
if anything, I love that quote of I think it's Bernard Henry Levy, is that the key to, I'm paraphrasing, but the key to civilization that's falling apart is not less civilization, it's better civilization or more civilization. So in the sense that, granted, say 300 years ago where life was a lot more brutal, these things could go. But today, precisely because we have such sophisticated societies, we can look at these situations and then question them and then wonder, well, are we going to participate in that? So
exactly. So there's this common argument. Well, our ancestors ate meat, and so this is the right way to eat it.
Right.
Our ancestors had gladiator kind of in the ring. They had all of these burning at the stake and whatever that history tells us.
Sure.
Does that justify doing it?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Well, especially at this point when humanity has really, this human culture has evolved so much that, like, the world is amazing, and we're able to interact with others, let's just say on a different from a different model, a different perspective, from the angle of compassion. and forgiveness and connection and strength. So, but strength not being exercised on others, but in a way, like, forgiving is a show of strength.
It is. It is one of the highest forms of strength and love.
So as somebody who's been around animals a lot, and I understand our interaction with animals, we understand, like most people that I meet, just assume that the world of humanity is the highest form of intellectual expression. For some people who don't know dogs, they'll just add a dog's a dog, it's all the same. But each dog has a very different personality, shaped by experience. You spent, I don't know how many days there, you connected with this horse on this level. And this horse, in a way, is the victim of a system of just really using her as a baby-making machine, just pumping them out.
So is a cow, so is beef, so is, or pork or whatever.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Whatever
yeah,
it is.
any animal. Yeah.
Any animal, right.
So what somebody's listening to this and we want to specifically inspire them somehow with a new thought. I think already entertaining the idea that connecting with this horse as having lived through trauma. So as a professional, how would you explain or articulate some kind of truth to this person to kind of understand, oh, wait a second, for them to do an internal sort of
reflection.
Yeah, right. Reflection, yeah.
So similarly, I didn't know that this is what goes on in the horse world. Right?
Okay.
So I think it's about awareness. I think it's about the veil of ignorance being lifted. I think it's about connecting with them. That connection is probably going to be the inroads to seeing how we are interlaced with all sentient beings in our universe. A lot of the meat that comes, you never see how it's slaughtered.
Right.
And there was an experiment done, I don't remember exactly this, but they took some children to the meat farms, and it's like every child came out saying, I'm not touching it.
Right, exactly. Right?
The other thing is also why is it that in meditation we prescribe vegetarianism? Again, vegetarianism doesn't mean that there's no cruelty. Again, there's a lot there that I can talk about, but I'll come to that later. But the point that I'm making here is when we are disconnected with whatever it is that we are partaking from or doing. For example, when you eat, when you don't eat mindfully, half the time you're eating mechanically and you don't really savor every single ingredient and you're not with that experience 100% in that moment. Your mind will be racing with some thought that you had about something you experienced earlier, and you're eating basically with emotions, right? And I think a lot of this is because partly culture, partly upbringing. My parents brought me up to drink milk. I had no idea the level of cruelty that is inflicted upon cows that give birth to their calves. So in a way, people, the idea that our parents may have passed on something to us that could possibly not be the best or the optimal thing for nature is a difficult one for people to handle, right? But if you go beyond that and understand our parents are not perfect. Our parents are also, they've embodied a certain culture, wisdom, prejudices, and we have inherited that. But individuation is about feeling gratitude and love for what they did and they could do for us.
Yeah.
And then using our own form of inquiry to embrace maybe the current realities. Maybe in their times, I don't think there was really animal farming the way it is today.
No.
That animal was hunted, maybe it had a life, it had its offspring around it, it could see the skies. So it is a very different context today than what our parents had, right? So for us, it's about awareness, spiritual awareness, growth, connection with nature, making certain choices which are contextually relevant. So that is what I would tell the person, that this is about your own, who you want to be, who do you want to grow into, what do you want to do for yourself and for this earth and for others. And it's not about judging people who eat meat. It's not about saying that because you eat meat, you're not a good person. Nothing to do with that. We all, the definition of love is letting others voluntarily evolve.
Okay.
Everybody is at their own different phase of so-called spiritual growth or evolvement.
Sure.
For the person who loves meat but can even have one day that is meatless, he's on that journey.
Sure.
For a person who says, okay, I need to eat meat, but I'm going to have grass-fed, at least you know that animals have had a chance to eat something that's more nutritious. For a person who's vegetarian, then, to understand that, okay, even though I'm vegetarian, but I wear silk, it's quite brutal how silk is made. You just you just boil those cocoons alive, right?
Yeah.
So for me, this process is more about spirituality. It's not about condemning anybody or judging anybody. It's where we want to go with this life. And the older I grow, the more simple I kind of want to make these choices that I make with my food, with my hobbies, with whatever I do. I think it's been so fulfilling. The less of material wants and needs you have, the more happier you become.
A fantastic sentence, truly. Okay, so in this image, okay, let me just look at this well. Okay, so it's a painting.
Yes.
You've signed it. It looks like, for species, I'd say it's probably a leopard of some sort. Not a leopard cat from Hong Kong, but probably a larger leopard from, like a proper large leopard. Mm-hmm. It's part of its head is kind of behind what looks like a tree of some sort. What's interesting is that the most well-defined area of this, so it's a portrait of a leopard. So all you see is the head and the neck, and there's no background. It's just the paper color, which is cream, is the background. And the execution-wise, what I would say has the most dramatic, impactful execution are the eyes.
The eyes.
Because that seems to be maybe where you put more attention, or that's definitely where, like, compositionally, that's where a viewer looks. And the leopard is looking straight on at the viewer. And it's super high contrast in terms of the colors, in terms of the presentation. So I have to, okay, so why this?
Well, you actually completely nailed it.
Okay, I'm going to say you totally missed the whole point. Okay,
no, you nailed it, because it looks like he has his gaze focused on his prey.
Right.
So he has a single focus where you can see from that expression that he's going after something, right?
The viewer.
Okay. Right. In this case, the viewer, I saw this in a photograph and I just fell in love with his eyes. So I do love painting because it's my form of flow, the state of flow, which is the state that gets you into a zone.
Csikszentmihalyi.
Well done. You studied, what gives people happiness.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is, apart from this, and yoga is what gives me a deep sense of flow. In fact, spiritual flow. Again, it's connection with an animal and nature.
Yeah.
And all yoga postures are actually postures that you will observe animals do. And also, I've been commissioned to do some works which I want to then use the proceeds from the sale of my works and put it back into the welfare of animals.
Okay.
So that gives me purposefulness.
Nice.
Apart from, the passion that I have, which is to paint. I haven't really decided what is me in terms of painting, but I know that they're bold colors.
Right. Well, that's definitely, like I said, high contrast. It looks almost like Conte stick, or it looks like more like a, not pastel, but is it paint, or is it?
It's done with pencils.
Pencils, right, yeah. Right. And the high contrast, the high key is so in choosing this as being the subject of what you wanted to illustrate or draw or create, your mind was clearly arrested by the gaze, right?
Yes.
Okay. So how does giving somebody else or empowering somebody else with a language to process their own trauma, grief, lives, experience, how is that reflected in your, I don't want to say your art very broadly, but in this particular piece?
Okay, in this particular piece, the eyes reminds me of a verse in the Patanjali Sutras. The Patanjali was the sage who brought yoga to the world, right? So he wrote a beautiful treatise on yoga, and one of them was the formula for success. His eyes reminded me of that formula.
Okay.
Which is ekagra. Eka means one. Ekagra, single focus view, right? Nairantarya in Sanskrit means unending, never giving up. Abhyasa, which means practice. So ekagra, nairantarya. Abhyasaha, Ishwar Pranidhana. Ishwar is a divine. Pranidhana is surrendering one's goal to the higher purpose.
Okay.
One achieves success, being single-focused, perseverant, never giving up. and repurposing our goals to the higher purpose, one achieves success in life. I like the fact that his gaze is, he probably doesn't see anything around him except that one goal or object that he wants.
Because he's hungry.
He's hungry.
That's his, yeah. So hunger. How does hunger feed? Puns are always intended. Okay, so how do you process or come to terms with hunger, which is biological? It's like a kind of, I've done some exercise, and food is fuel. Because you can't always be conscious and mindful about the food you eat. Of course, when you have that space around you to be calm and quiet, and enjoy the meal. But isn't being mindful all the time impractical, exhausting, naive?
Yeah, it is exhausting because our brain, we have not, over so many years, we have practiced doing things mechanically. We've got to get to work on time. We've got to quickly get a cup of coffee, grab something on the way, and we come back. And because our brain is so fascinating, it has an innate capacity to wire, rewire, learn, and unlearn. And we are a product of habituation. So it is tiring to live life at a more conscious awareness level, right?
Sure.
Therefore, yes, which is actually why our growth cannot happen without the distress and the discomforts, because we are so used to doing things and thinking in a particular way, a pattern of behavior, which causes us a lot of suffering, right? So learning takes time, unlearning takes time, and learning new ways takes time. So obviously it's got to be tedious. And therefore the path of growth, the path of evolvement, making conscious choices and awareness doesn't come without its challenges and difficulties. But then, is there anything in life that was ever worth gaining without the pain?
Okay.
Right? So yes, it's so much easier to say, I'm just going to eat whatever comes my way. I'm just going to live life however it is. FOMO, the fear of missing out. I'm going to try everything. It's so easy to think on an individualistic level and not think of the collective karmic consequences of our actions. Right.
Yeah. You asked me earlier before I started recording what I do in terms of my work. So part of it is this idea of service network leadership or service leadership. So a house, a family, an office, a clinic, these are all networks. Parents and their children form a kind of network. And that network has a health. And so what we say is that when we want to reach the highest level of service leadership, one of the best ways of doing that is to give, and we say there's a spiritual dimension, and it's not about theistic. So for example, I'm an atheist, but it's more about giving to something that's bigger than yourself.
Right.
Okay.
That's the higher purpose of the wholesome goodness we talked about, isn't it?
Sure. Okay, so you've been very kind to welcome me into your home for this lovely hour. How can we wrap this up into this perfect package that somebody who's listening is going to look more into what you're doing? Be it EMDR, be it painting, be it vegetarianism? So how would you like to articulate this for somebody to kind of turn this episode off and then go somewhere and do something? So move it to action. So what would that be?
To move it to action would be to set the intention when you wake up every day. To set the intention on waking every day that I will live my life today with compassion.
Okay.
And then everything else will fall in place. The choices you make, the answers you give, the questions that you are facing, the things that you need to do to get through the day. If you set the intention to meet your day with compassion for yourself and for others.
Okay. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Thank you. This has been great. I'm just trying to think, is there anything else? So in terms of the academic underpinnings of your work, and then therefore the connections that you're making in terms of trauma, how do you feel within the Hong Kong context, going from India to Singapore, Hong Kong, how do you make sense of those three in terms of now, as we're pulling out of the pandemic, like what have you seen at on the practice level in terms of your clients?
Well, I know that what I've seen is the different cultures inform a person's way of thinking, choices, behaviors very deeply. And sadly enough, whatever you're seeing happening in the world today or historically, we're getting more and more sophisticated in the weapons that we use. On the one hand, you see incredible humanity, examples every day, whether it's Ukraine. The center of it all is if there were compassion to see everything as one and interlaced. We see borders, but we don't see one planet. We see different cultures, which says that, my culture deems that this is appropriate, that is not appropriate. If we were only able to see beyond it, way above beyond it, from a much, what would you call it, a 360-degree view.
Okay.
And when I take that approach with my clients, of course, I have to be very sensitive to their culture. Because culture can enrich us, it can also limit us.
Sure.
The ability to see where it helps us grow and where it limits us, I think is the thrust of the work that I do in these different countries. The suffering is universal. Suffering is inevitable. Being miserable is optional. And the difference between suffering and misery has to do with all the filters that we, view the world with.
Here's a question for you. You meet this delightful, touching being called Mary, who's suffering, who's miserable. How did you help her?
So the one thing that I have started doing in the last, I think, 8 or 9 years, is that I have a couple of NGOs that I believe conduct their work with integrity, where the money goes to the cause.
Yeah.
I regularly donate. And I donate, I would say, a fair amount. And it doesn't, not that I am rich or anything.
Yeah.
But the sense that, well, I'll have to show you from my mobile. So I had this horse that was blind, delivered a baby. And this horse was, pregnant and being made to pull carts in the sun.
Wow.
So I approached the NGO and said, buy her off the owner. Bring her in. She had glaucoma. She could see the baby that she gave birth. A lot of money behind neutering, spaying the animals. With Mary, the lady who agreed to take her in had said that when she would finally be up for sale, because her current owner was not willing to give up on her, she would still bear a few foals, right?
Yeah.
That she would then, when she's no more useful to that market, she would have her. And I told her that when that time comes, let me know. Because then I would be happy to pay for her to buy that horse.
Aren't you amazing?
Right? I think it's the only thing that anyone would have done, and you too. The other thing that I did was I made a pact that I would talk about her so that, if a child wanted to go to the zoo, I don't know whether I will have grandchildren, whether my children plan to have theirs, they're married, but I know what I would bring to them as a grandmother.
Right.
I would teach them that if you want to see dolphins, go to the oceans.
Right.
If you want to see horses, just go to, places where you would see them.
Right.
If you want to see camels, go to the deserts.
Right.
Go to their habitat. Let them be free. Enlightening them about, I remember when I was a little girl and all my friends used to go to school that was very so-called elite, and they would buy all Prada, Chanel, until I came across a documentary to see what goes into the making of the leather. So, to answer your question, what would I do? I would use my knowledge to share it with others. Hopefully then they would feel empowered, or even a sense of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Compassion?
No, not
Empathy.
compassion. Not even compassion. To explore.
Right. Curiosity.
Curiosity.
There
we go. Curiosity of really, where do these things come from? How do I connect with its history?
Yeah.
When you just eat an almond, that almond has gone through a journey where somebody has planted a seed.
Yep.
It became a tree.
Yeah.
Somebody picked it. somebody else nurtured it, watered it,
Yeah.
the earth caressed it. Do we have those deeper connections?
Yeah, or understanding, for sure.
Understanding. I think it's all about those deeper connections and understanding. That's what compassion is about. So all my trauma patients had the people who had, been part of that, the pain that they went through. If they had some connection with them, probably wouldn't do it. It's because we're disconnected.
Of course.
Right?
Woo! It's a lot. Thank you. I'm moving away from Hong Kong. This is my last face-to-face podcast in Hong Kong for a while.
Is it?
Yes, I'm leaving Tuesday.
I'm sorry to hear that.
But we met. Here we are. The universe put us together.
Where are you off to?
Canada.
Canada.
Yes.
It's a beautiful place.
It is a very beautiful
place. Where in Canada?
Anywhere. I'm starting off in Toronto and I don't know where I'll end up. So
I wish I could travel. We have another 2 years left here because of my husband's work. And then, boy, am I dying to go to the Himalayas.
Sure. I don't want to say your name incorrectly. So
Nivedita.
Nivedita. Sorry. Nivedita. Okay, so thank you so much, Nivedita. Thank you so much. It's so great.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting.